Hey everybody, this is Eli from Elfbait. Welcome back. Today I wanted to talk about kind of one of my gripes with 5th edition, but that's not going to be what the video is about. It's kind of how to take a look at this, what I feel is sort of an issue with 5th edition D&D and how to fix it. So, not an authority on the subject, but certainly been through a few editions. But really what I want to talk about is languages. And so, one of the things that I like in games is a complex landscape of language. We have languages in fantasy RPGs for different species. You've got Elven, you've got Dwarven, Halfling. You've got all these different languages for the various planes now. We've got RN, which is the language of the air, and you've got infernal or whatever, which is the language of the demons, and you've got Sylvan, which is now the language of the fairy. You've got all these different languages. But then again, fifth edition kind of decides to just kind of go bleh and make it to where all humans speak common. Now, to me, this makes for a really boring landscape, and I know why they did it. They wanted it to where the average character, every character is going to be able to talk to another character. Every PC race, I'm pretty sure, speaks common. So, while it's great that they all speak common, even though I have my own personal issues with the concept of a common language in a setting, the fact that almost every other thing out there also seems to speak common, or at least the things you're going to encounter regularly. Why do we have languages? Languages, kind of like alignment in 5th edition, seem to almost be reaching that vestigial point. I mean, I think alignment is pretty much vestigial in 5th. There's not really any sort of rules that hang on alignment, but that's a subject for another video. But where you get with languages is, it already bothered me enough that language for species, for the different races, was simplified. All dwarves spoke Dwarven, all elves spoke Elven. And you could kind of hand wave that by saying that all of those races were typically, supposed to be a lesser population or an older race that maybe just had its stuff together and, were sort of unified, whereas humans were this scattered, complicated thing that didn't make sense by the standards of dwarves and elves, who just didn't get it. But if that is the case, and these races are, and humans are supposed to be the complex ones, and it talks about humans are complex, complicated creatures. That is why humans get a stat boost to every stat in 5th edition, because they're good at everything. They're just diverse, and they just seem to excel at everything. They kind of chalk up this complexity and this diversity. And funny thing is, diversity being kind of a catch-all in gaming now, or not a catch-all, but a kind of a catch-all, but more of a buzzword or an actual detail, an actual factor. I don't want to downplay it. Let me put it this way, there's a goal to breed diversity into gaming. Yet at the same time, there's a simplification of humanity in games, or in D&D at least, to bring it back to where they all speak human. They all speak common. There's like this weird way that like everybody speaks the same language. Now, you could make a case again that there is a common tongue. Maybe it's a trade tongue, or there's some sort of universal pidgin, or most folk speak their local dialect and some fantasy equivalent of Latin or whatever that is the root of all languages, whatever. You can do that. But in my settings, I really like to do a complex language landscape. Now, to do this requires some tweaking of the system in 5th edition. We're not looking at 3.5 where you actually had skill points, bonus skill points for intelligence, or back in AD&D where you got bonus languages for having a high intelligence. Somebody commented recently, I believe it was actually in a live chat on Nerdarchy, that intelligence had become kind of the new dump stat. There's not a lot in 5th edition that really directly accesses intelligence. It's going to be your attribute modifier for a wizard as a spellcaster, but there are so many other spellcasters who use, wisdom, or if you're like a warlock, you're using charisma as your spellcasting ability. But intelligence, other than an effect on spellcasting, doesn't do anything else. So if you're going to do a complex language environment for your game, you're going to want to go ahead and probably harken back to that earlier time of D&D where we had some sort of skill bonus for high intelligence. And while you're at adding in extra languages, you could add in a bonus for just generally skills. I realize that the skill landscape for the skill spread in 5th edition has been greatly streamlined, and so it's harder to justify the free use of expansive bonus skill points, because then everybody in the party is going to have everything. But you could do something like intelligence, your intelligence stat bonus. One of the things I was thinking about is take your intelligence stat bonus, +1, 2, 3, and this is a set of bonus languages you can have. The other thing you could do is allow those intelligence slots to be used for proficiencies, for selecting like an additional proficiency from your character class or your background. So you're not allowing the character to have free range, rampant, just open access to skills, but you're allowing them to be better based on that intelligence at their chosen career. Many of the steps in the character classes and the backgrounds, and even some of the races, for example, tell you to choose from a selection of proficiencies. And so this would allow you to choose another option from that and be better at what you are having, while still not giving you just this open access to say, okay, well, I'm a cleric and there's nothing about my class that says I should have, nature, but I have nature. Nothing in my background says nature. You're not going to get extra stuff that's going to be way outside of, out of left field. But it now allows you to have extra languages. And then it also, but if for those characters who don't want extra languages, or maybe it doesn't fit their background, or the player who isn't interested in languages, he's still not left hanging. If you're going to do a complex language environment, you need to change the way that languages start for humans, and have their and for any race that you're gonna widen, you're gonna broaden the language base on. So in a setting I have, there are 3 language groups and 5 languages. Now, that's just within this one culture. And so I have a language tree. You have these 3. So basically what you ended up having is there are 3 original variations on the language. Or actually, originally they all spoke the same language. They came through, and those 3 those 3 groups have now bred variations on language. And so what I did is I did a chart that says, this region speaks this and this. This region speaks this and this. This region speaks this and this. And those are starting languages for the characters there. This would be equivalent of saying, like, folks in Europe might speak English and French. They might speak French and German. They might speak, Dutch and German. They might, whatever, likely they're speaking their language, their local language, and probably 1 or 2 languages from the neighboring cultures, or at least have the option to speak those. Now, you can also do this with humanoid and demi-human languages. It's very, very believable to say that elves, high elves and wood elves speak different versions of the language. Most versions of those elves, they actually have a split far enough back in history to where you can justify having distinct languages. Now, this is where the concept of related languages actually helps out. So in a campaign I ran, High Elves and Wood Elves spoke different languages, but they were variations on the same base language. They could understand one another, but there would sometimes be difficulties in getting the exact meaning. You know, the word for what, let's say the word for dagger in one language might only mean knife in the other language. And dagger has a different word. A militarized knife as opposed to an actual knife. Whereas the Wood Elves may not see a difference between the two, because the Wood Elves, a knife is a knife. So you can add this complexity and have dialects in there as well. So, but again, if you're going to add that complexity, you need to make a way for the players to access it in their characters. So having a bonus starting language is a good way to go. If you're going to break it down into more complex things, you have to counter it by either just granting a bonus language, which is what I've done in the past before I got to thinking about using intelligence bonus again. Grant a bonus language, which is their native tongue. I mean, everybody should speak their native tongue. I mean, you'd assume so at least. And then allow them to have, you can keep a common tongue in there. You could make it, though, where the common tongue is not common. If you relegate the common tongue to, say, like a trade tongue, then you could actually decide to pull it out of the generally available languages and attach it to certain backgrounds. Merchants, for example, might have the trade tongue. The Outlander might have the trade tongue because he wanders around and deals with other individuals. You can find a place for it. But I really think that actually, and I'm considering visiting this in my current campaign, is making the intelligence modifier bonus languages and extra proficiency slots for class, race, and background features. Not new ones, but just an extra selection from whatever's listed there. And that we'll see how that goes. I mean, granted, it may make the characters overly skilled, but I think skills is, if you want your players to roleplay more, having them have a wider array of skills or be more competent in their skills is going to allow them to roleplay their way through situations rather than necessarily feel like they have to resort to combat. But anyways, this has been kind of my thoughts on how to add some depth to language in a game, and something to consider about with intelligence. Think about using intelligence as bonus proficiency slots in languages. If you like it, talk about it below. If you don't like it, talk about it below. Comments are always appreciated. Certainly love hearing from folks. Like, share, subscribe, get the word out. The more folks that can come in and check out Elfbait, the more people I can help out. If you know somebody who's new to the game and is looking for somebody looking for a way to check out some kind of low-key videos about how to start. I'm a humble guy. I'm in my garage. You can see you got the weed whacker over there, toolbox, and a freezer back there. It's nothing special. No green screen. I don't even have a good microphone. But certainly like talking to you folks out there and making sure that everybody's getting their best game on. And that's going to be my cue to exit. Thanks for checking me out. Get out and game.